The most painful thing a grandfather can do is stand at the edge of a life he built and realize the door has been quietly shut in his face. For most of my years, I believed that showing up every single time, without complaint, without condition, was its own kind of language. I believed the people I loved would eventually speak it back to me. But some people never learn that language. They only learn the one that sounds like a credit card sliding across a restaurant table. It took a collapsed highway overpass and a television camera pointed at my face for my son to understand what he had thrown away. And by the time he figured it out, I had already stopped waiting for him to. Welcome, fathers and grandfathers. If you have ever poured everything you had into raising a child, your time, your money, your Saturday mornings, your retirement savings, and then watched that child drift towards someone shinier without so much as a backward glance, then you already know the particular kind of quiet that fills a house when you realize you have become optional. Stay with me, because this story is for you. To understand what happened on that Tuesday in September, you need to understand Ray Kowalski first. Ray is 74 years old and lives in a faded green ranch house on Persimmon Road, about 2 miles outside of Gable Creek, Tennessee. He runs the only volunteer fire and rescue auxiliary in the county that isn't funded by the state, a scrappy, underpaid outfit called the Gable Creek Community Rescue Corps. They operate out of a converted grain storage building at the edge of Route 41, with 2 used rescue trucks that Ray maintains himself in his driveway on weekends. Ray has a bad knee from a logging accident in 1987, and he walks with a slight drag of his left foot that gets worse when the weather turns cold. His face looks like a topographic map of every hard season Tennessee has thrown at him. He has never asked for recognition, never applied for a grant, never held a fundraiser. He just shows up, every single time. When there's a house fire, Ray is there. When an elderly woman on County Road 9 drives her car into a ditch at midnight, Ray is the one who sits with her in the dark until the ambulance arrives. He is the kind of man who makes you feel ashamed for having ever once chosen comfort over duty. My name is Gerald Harmon. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 37 years as a structural ironworker before my hands finally told me enough was enough. I know what it means to spend your life building things that other people walk across without a second thought. I built bridges. I built overpasses. I welded steel in temperatures that would peel the paint off a car. My body carries the record of every cold morning and every hot afternoon I ever traded for a paycheck. When my wife Carol passed 6 years ago, the center of my world shifted so far that I spent the better part of a year just trying to remember what day it was. But I kept going, because that's what you do. You keep going. My son Marcus is 38. He's a regional sales director at a pharmaceutical distribution company in Nashville. He wears pressed shirts and drives a silver Mercedes and speaks in the soft, practiced tone of a man who has spent years learning how to make people feel like they're agreeing with him of their own free will. 3 years ago, Marcus married a woman named Stephanie. Stephanie is smart and polished and comes from a family with vacation homes and opinions about wine. I don't dislike Stephanie. But Stephanie has a mother named Diane who has never once passed up an opportunity to let Marcus know that my work boots and my calloused hands and my Gable Creek zip code are not quite what she had in mind for her daughters. Father-in-law, I tried. Grandfathers, I want you to hear me say that plainly. I tried. I drove the 2 hours to Nashville every month for the first year of their marriage. I brought ham and green beans from my garden. I fixed the leak under their kitchen sink without being asked. I helped Marcus install crown molding in the nursery when they found out Stephanie was pregnant, because Diane had hired a contractor who quoted them $3,000, and I did it in a Saturday afternoon for the cost of a box of finish nails. Their daughter, my granddaughter Rosie, was born 22 months ago. She has Carol's eyes and Marcus's chin, and she laughs like something that has never once been told it isn't enough. The first time I held her, I cried in the car for 20 minutes before I could drive home safely. I'm not ashamed of that. What I am ashamed of is how long I let things slide. The shift happened gradually, the way water damage happens. First, it was the monthly visits becoming every 6 weeks, then every 2 months. Then Marcus started mentioning that Diane and her husband Frank were around a lot helping with the baby, taking Stephanie to appointments, being convenient in the way that only people who live 20 minutes away can be. I told myself it was normal. I told myself proximity isn't loyalty. I told myself to stop keeping score. Then came the call. It was a Thursday afternoon in late August. I was sitting on my back porch shelling butter beans, listening to the creek at the bottom of my property run its ordinary, unhurried business. My phone lit up with Marcus's name, and I answered it the way I always did, with a kind of low, private relief, because every call from him felt like a small proof that I still mattered to his daily life. He asked how I was doing with the particular efficiency of someone who already has the next thing on his mind. I told him fine. I told him I'd been doing some work down at the rescue corps with Ray, hauling gravel and repairing the roll-up door on the larger equipment bay. There was a pause. "Dad," Marcus said, and his voice had that careful, prearranged quality I'd come to recognize. "Stephanie's parents are flying in from Scottsdale on the 14th. Her dad got them all tickets to the Tennessee-Alabama game, box seats. It's the whole weekend Friday dinner, game on Saturday. Rosie's 8-month photos on Sunday with that photographer Stephanie's been trying to book for months." Another pause. "It's just going to be a lot of people, and the house is going to be crowded, and Diane is already stressed about the logistics. It might not be the best weekend for you to come up." I hadn't said anything about coming up that weekend. I hadn't mentioned a visit at all. I set the bowl of beans down on the porch railing very carefully, the way you set something down when you want your hands to have something gentle to do. "I wasn't planning to come up that weekend, Marcus," I said. "Right, I know," he said quickly. "I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page, because last time you mentioned maybe coming in September, and I didn't want you to make the drive and find the house in chaos." "When is a good weekend?" I asked, straight and plain. There was a longer pause. I could hear Stephanie's voice somewhere in the background, light and conversational, not directed at him. I heard Rosie making the small, liquid sounds she makes when she's working up to either a laugh or a complaint. "Honestly, Dad, October might be better. Things calm down after the fall schedule. Frank and Diane are back in Scottsdale by then." Frank and Diane. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "I haven't seen Rosie since her christening, Marcus. That was 4 months ago." "I know, Dad. October will be great. I'll call you next week and we'll nail something down." He said it the way people say things they have no intention of nailing down. Then he said he had a work call starting in 5 minutes and asked if we could catch up more over the weekend. I said sure. He said great. And the call ended the way a door closes when the person leaving doesn't quite want to make the sound of it shutting. I didn't move from that porch chair for a long time. The creek kept on at the bottom of the hill. The butter beans sat half-shelled in the ceramic bowl Carol had picked out at a church sale in 2003. Grandfathers. If you have ever sat in the particular silence of realizing that your own grandchild is being scheduled around someone else's convenience, I'm asking you to hit that like button right now, not for me, but so this story finds the other men sitting on their porches feeling the same thing I felt that afternoon. There are more of us than anyone wants to count. The following Monday, I drove down to the rescue corps before sunrise. Ray was already there, as he always was, pulling maintenance on the smaller truck's brake lines in the yellow pool of a work light hung from the ceiling beam. "You look like a man who got some news he didn't want," Ray said, not looking up from the brake assembly. I handed him a wrench he was about to reach for and crouched down beside him. I told him about the call. Ray listened the way Ray always listens, completely, without filling the space, without offering the kind of reassurance that costs nothing and changes nothing. When I finished, he wiped his hands on a red shop rag and looked at the wall for a moment. "My daughter moved to Portland 12 years ago," he said. "She calls on my birthday and at Christmas. First few years, that used to feel like something missing. Now it just feels like Portland." He handed me the shop rag. A man finds out where he belongs by paying attention to where he's actually needed. "You want to be needed, Gerald. Be here Tuesday morning at 5. County road crew called. There's a section of the Route 41 bridge that's showing stress fractures at the anchor joints. Engineers are coming out to assess, and I told the county foreman we'd provide support." I looked at him. "You told me you built bridges for 37 years, Ray said. Seems to me you still know something the engineers might find useful. I was there at 5 o'clock Tuesday morning. The Route 41 bridge, over Sycamore Creek, had been showing minor surface cracking for 2 months, but what the engineers found that Tuesday, when they put instruments to the anchor points, made the color drain out of the lead engineer's face. 3 of the 4 primary load-bearing anchor bolts on the eastern span had developed stress fractures consistent with metal fatigue that nobody had caught in the last inspection cycle. The bridge carried 600 vehicles a day, including 2 school bus routes. They closed it within the hour. What followed was 4 days of the most consuming, purposeful work I had done since I retired. The county didn't have a structural ironworker on their emergency response roster. Ray had told the foreman I was available. I spent those 4 days on site from before sunrise until after dark, working alongside the county engineers and a contracted crew from Knoxville, reading stress patterns in the steel the way I had spent a career learning to read them, advising on anchor replacement sequencing that cut the repair timeline by nearly a full day. My hands remembered every single thing I thought I'd left behind me. On the second day, a woman brought sandwiches and iced tea out from the gas station on the county road for the crew. On the third day, a retired schoolteacher stopped her car and stood by the barriers for 20 minutes, just watching us work. And when I came down off the access ladder for a water break, she grabbed my forearm with both hands and said, "My grandbabies take that bus. Thank you." I didn't know what to do with that kind of gratitude. I had forgotten what it felt like to have it offered without condition. On the evening of the 4th day, a Friday, the bridge reopened. The county road supervisor organized a small press event, nothing elaborate, just a cluster of local news cameras and the county commissioner shaking hands. Ray and I were both standing off to the side when a reporter from the Gable Creek Gazette and a camera crew from the Knoxville affiliate found us. The reporter, a young man named Derek, had a way of asking questions that made you feel like the truth was the only reasonable answer. "Sir," he said, holding the microphone toward me, "can you tell us your name and what brought you out here for 4 days of emergency structural work?" I looked at the camera the way I look at most things, straight on, without preparation. "My name is Gerald Harmon," I said. "I'm a retired ironworker. Ray here runs the Gable Creek Rescue Corps. When the county needed somebody who understood what was happening in that steel, Ray knew I had the background, so I came out. Mr. Harmon, do you have family watching at home tonight?" I took a breath of the evening air. It tasted like creek water and cooling metal, and the specific satisfaction of a thing done right. "My son is up in Nashville," I said. "He's been busy with his family this fall, so I had some time on my hands." I looked back at the bridge. Turns out 600 people a day needed somebody to show up. Seemed like a reasonable way to spend a week. Derek nodded slowly. Behind him I could see the camera light glowing orange in the dusk. I didn't think anything more of it. Ray and I drove back to the Corps in his truck, stopped at the diner on Mill Street for chicken and biscuits, and I was asleep in my own bed by 9:30. My phone rang at 11:14. "Marcus." I let it ring. It rang again at 11:22. Then Stephanie's name appeared. Then a number I didn't recognize. I sat up and counted 7 missed calls in the space of 20 minutes. I called Marcus back. He answered on half a ring. His voice had a quality I had never heard in it before, not quite distress, not quite anger, something between the two that had been shaken loose from its usual packaging. "Dad, are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm in my bedroom," I said. "In Gable Creek, where I live. We saw you on the news." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Stephanie had the Knoxville affiliate on in the background, and you were right there." The anchor was talking about the bridge. "They showed the clip twice, Dad. You said you had time on your hands because I was busy with my family." "That's what I said," I agreed. "Because that's what's true." There was a silence. Then I heard Stephanie's voice, closer now, and I heard Diane's voice further back, distinct and unhappy, and I realized with a kind of flat clarity that Marcus was not alone in this moment. He was managing an audience. "Diane is very upset," Marcus said quietly. "She said it makes it sound like I pushed you out." "Marcus," I said, and my voice was very calm, the way a level is calm, the way a plumb line is calm. I called you 3 times in September, and you let them go to voicemail. You told me October would be better to visit because Frank and Diane had a football weekend. I haven't held Rosie since she was 4 months old. I didn't say any of that to the reporter. I just said I had some free time. Dad, you don't understand how this looks. I understand exactly how it looks, I said. It looks accurate. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, in a smaller voice, "We need you, Dad. Actually, we have a situation. Frank was supposed to fly home Sunday, but he put his back out at the game and can't travel. He and Diane are still here. The fold-out bed in the guest room broke a rail, you know that one that's been sticking? And Frank can't sleep on the floor with his back. And Stephanie's car started making a grinding noise on the way home from the airport, and the shop can't get it in until Monday. I know you have your tools, and you know how to look at the car, and you fixed that bed frame the last time." I sat there in the dark of my bedroom and I felt something very clearly. Not anger. Something much quieter. Something that had been building for 3 years, in small, unremarked increments, and had finally reached the very top of the container it had been poured into. "Marcus," I said, "I've been down at that bridge for 4 days. I'm tired, my back is sore, and I have to be at the rescue corps at 6 tomorrow morning because Ray has a training session for 3 new volunteers, and he needs an extra hand. Dad, it would just be a couple of hours." "Frank is a retired orthodontist from Scottsdale," I said. "He has resources. There are furniture rental companies in Nashville that deliver same day on a Saturday. There are mobile mechanics who make house calls on weekends. I know because I've used one. Frank can figure those things out." "Dad." Marcus's voice had gone very quiet. "That's not fair." "What's not fair, son, is that I drove 2 hours to your house for Rosie's christening, and Diane spent the whole weekend calling me Jerry. She knows my name is Gerald, and nobody corrected her. What's not fair is that you told me October would be a better time to visit, but you called me tonight, not because you missed me, and not because Rosie asked for her grandfather, but because your in-laws need a handyman, and you knew I'd come." I paused. "I love you, Marcus. I love Rosie more than I have words for. But I am not the person you call when the convenient option runs out. I am your father. Those are not the same thing." He didn't say anything for a long time. When he did speak, his voice had lost all the practiced smoothness. He sounded, for just a moment, like the boy who used to fall asleep in the truck on the way home from job sites when I used to take him along on Saturdays. "I know," he said, very quietly. "I know, Dad. I let that sit between us. I'll call you Monday," I said. "Not about bed rails or car noise, just to talk. Good night, son." I hung up. I turned the phone over on the nightstand so the screen faced down. I lay back and looked at the ceiling and listened to the creek at the bottom of the property, doing what it has always done, moving steadily, without drama, toward wherever it's going. In the morning, the sky was so clear and so blue it looked like something a child would paint. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the spot where Carol used to sit across from me, and I read the paper that gets delivered to the end of my driveway every Saturday morning regardless of what else is happening in the world. There were 3 texts from Marcus when I turned my phone back on. They were halting, imperfect apologies mixed with explanations, the kind of message a person writes when they're genuinely sorry, but not yet entirely sure what for. I didn't reply yet, not because I was punishing him, because some things need to be said with a voice, not a text message, and I wanted to give both of us time to mean what we said. I drove down to Ray's place at 8:20 with a container of leftover biscuits from the night before. He was on his porch in the early light, doing absolutely nothing, which is something Ray does with the same completeness he brings to everything else. I sat down in the chair next to him. "Bridge held up overnight," he said. "Good engineering usually does," I said. We sat for a while without talking. A pair of mockingbirds were working the old oak at the edge of his yard, and somewhere down the road someone was cutting grass, and the world was conducting its ordinary business, entirely indifferent to anything Marcus or Diane or Frank from Scottsdale thought about any of it. "You going to call your boy?" Ray asked eventually. "Monday," I said. "Let it breathe first." Ray nodded. "Fair enough." I looked out at the road. I thought about Rosie's eyes, which are Carol's eyes, and which will look at me someday when she is old enough to form the question of who her grandfather was. I decided in that moment, quietly and without drama, what I wanted the answer to that question to be. Not the man who drove 2 hours to fix bed rails for an orthodontist from Scottsdale. Not the man who waited by the phone for a call that only came when something needed repairing. The man who showed up for the bridge. The man who sat with Ray on a Saturday morning and watched the mockingbirds and didn't need anything from anyone to feel like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Grandfathers and fathers, thank you for sitting with me through this story. If you've ever had to learn the difference between being needed and being useful only when it's convenient, then you know exactly what this morning felt like. If this found you at a time when you're figuring out your own version of that difference, I hope it helps to know you're not alone in the working out of it. I'm going to call Marcus on Monday, not to repair anything, just to talk, because I still believe in the possibility of him, even when he makes it complicated to do so. That's what fathers do. We hold the belief even when it costs us something. We just stop letting it cost us everything. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to stand your ground the way Ray stood his quietly, without applause, in the cold early morning before anyone else was even awake. I read every single one. Hit that like button if this story reached something real in you, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Stay steady, brothers. Go where you are needed, and know the difference.